Hi, I'm the young, beautiful, and talented Jane Glenn.
And I'm the even younger, beautiful, and talented Jennifer Glenn. One of the great things about preserving is that you can start when you're our age.
And keep on doing it until you're real old.
Hey, watch it!
If you're in a pickle, cause there's nothing left to spread, got a kitchen full of people and there's nothing in your head, we've got all the answers, got a love for you in store, pickles, sausage, chutney, jelly, jams, and more. Put a lid on it, put a lid on it, there's just nothing in the world you can't preserve. Put a lid on it, put a lid on it, and sit back and get the praise that you deserve.
What to bring a new mother besides sleepers, diapers, and some moral support that might help her with that new baby or toddler, and how to turn your kids on to some interesting lunches, breaking away from the usual cookies and treats that we tend to put in.
Today's show is divided into two parts: baby food with special emphasis on care and preparation, and two foods that are great for older children. The objective, we want to show you that preserved foods are easy, nutritious, and taste great. Courtney and Carolyn are going to help us prepare and preserve them. Now, since Jane's the self-proclaimed expert on baby food, since she has two daughters, the girls and I are going to go off and start our crafts. So we'll see you in a little bit.
Bye, girls. Now, I'm going to be right back to show you how to make some fabulous baby food. This show on baby food and kid food isn't just for expectant mothers. You might have a friend or a relative who's expecting a baby, and a great idea might be to get together and instead of having a traditional shower, have a preserving party. Or you might be an expectant grandparent. So we hope to give you some great ideas today about baby food and kid food. Now, my first recipe, actually, speaking of that, I really should call Jennifer back in here because I think she could learn something. Jenny, how about it?
I've got your tray of frozen things here. Now, I'm going to prove to Jane that even when she was nattering on and I pretended not to listen, I did pick up a few things from you about kid food and baby food, so I'm going to prove it.
Nattering on, what a nice thing to say about your sister. Now, our first recipe is going to be for pureed baby food. We're going to use strawberries, 2 cups, peaches, 2 cups, and 1 cup of water. Now, if you're a mother, you probably already know that new foods are introduced to your baby one at a time. But we're combining these two because they make a great tasting treat for your baby. So, we're going to take our strawberries and our peaches in our water. And now, what do you think we're going to do, Jennifer?
We're going to put our water in, we're going to take it to the stove and cook it for about 10 minutes or until our fruit's nice and tender.
I'm impressed. Now, we're going to cover that. And this recipe is for the baby who's just starting to be introduced to solids. So we want to puree it very, very fine.
Now, this is something that I did pick up from Jane. I hate to admit it, but I did. All the fruits can be put in the boiling water bath for processing, but our vegetables are low in acids, so we have to freeze those, correct?
That's very good, and we should also add sugar, salt, and any spices. We don't want to put in any baby food, because that's one of the nice things about making it yourself. You know exactly what is in it. And we always try to use very, very fresh ingredients, because vegetables and fruits start to lose their nutrients soon after they're picked.
Now, until Jane had kids, I always thought French fries were a food group. She has corrected me.
I think Jennifer still does think that's a food group. Now, we're going to puree that very finely.
I'll push the button.
All right?
Okay, little mama, is that fine enough?
That looks great. I'm going to get some jars.
And that does look good. I think the kids will really like this.
Now, we're using 1/4 pint jars.
And I need a jar filler, please.
Really? Well, after that nattering, little mama, I don't know if I should give you anything.
Oh, you should. You should. Always.
Well, I'd like to give you something. Would I ever? Now, we're going to still want to leave a 1/2 inch head space. And as always, we wipe our rims. Then we're going to center our snap lid on.
And I wipe the rim, or you wipe the rim?
Now we're going to put our screw band on fingertip tight. Now this recipe makes about 6 of our 1/4 pint jars. So we're going to process it in our boiling water bath for 20 minutes. And by then our snap lids will have turned down. You can store them. Great treat for baby. So that's our first recipe. Now we're going to do some vegetables, and therefore the baby that's a little older, has a few teeth, and is starting to eat foods that have a bit of bigger consistency to them.
A little bit of texture.
Yes, and you can see, actually you can probably see the steam still rising from these vegetables. We steam them because we don't want to lose any of the good vitamins and nutrients that sometimes can come out when you boil your vegetables. And the other reason we're putting them in while they're hot is because with any kind of food, not just baby food, we want to take this as soon as we put it into our freezer trays, ice cube trays. We want to put it into the freezer right away. We don't want it to cool on the counter.
Okay, I'll take a little bit of water.
Yes, depending on how old your baby is and how many teeth, that will determine how much water you use.
Okay, here we go again.
Now I'll just push some of that down at the top. The thing about doing it yourself, you want to make sure that everything is the same consistency. For example, we still have a whole carrot, and you don't want your baby to be choking on big pieces, so we want everything to be the same consistency.
Be a little hard to chew with only 2 teeth.
Yes, it would. Oh, that looks great.
Oh, I made a mess.
So, Jennifer's going to fill a couple here. And we'll also tell you that once you put them in the freezer, it's best to use them between 6 to 8 weeks. Because if they stay in the freezer for longer than that, they tend to lose some of the goodness. But the nice thing about that is babies have been eating these, say, for 6 to 8 weeks. Then they're ready to move on to a food that has a little more chunk to it. And that would be our chunky applesauce, which Courtney and Carolyn are going to show us how to make in the next segment.
Can you tell Jane wants me to be feeding her 2 girls a little more nutritious food than what I have been?
Well, I didn't like to say too many things.
Okay, so we've got that in. Do you want me to do a few more?
No, this is great because what you want to do, you can see how full. Then we slip this in the freezer. And then about 12 to 18 hours later, when it's frozen, you want to remove them and place them in a baggie. And you want to label it right away. Because frozen food, especially baby food, tends to look the same.
It all kinds of goes together.
So it's a great way to feed your baby. So in our next segment, as we said, Courtney and Carolyn are going to help us make chunky applesauce. And then they're going to make
whatever. We don't know. It's called pickled anything. They get to choose.
Well, it's a great recipe for kids because we've found that when you let kids help to make things, they tend to want to eat it. So we're going to let them pickle anything they want. And chances are if they make it, they're going to eat it. So it's going to be very, very interesting.
I've got them off getting those crafts ready too.
So we'll be back in a few moments. Stay with us.
Hi, girls.
Hi, Auntie.
I'm back to see what you're up to. Oh, these look really nice. All the bags that the girls are doing today are to put the preserves that they've made into them and give them away as gifts. So let's see what you've done, girls. Tell me about it.
Well, I've done this marker, and all I did was color it with markers, and I'm working on podge.
I bet you that first bag you did is for your applesauce.
How did you guess?
Oh, the apple might have given it away. And the podge. How do you do that?
Well, you just take some scrap material that you have laying around the house, and you set it where you want it, and you just go over it with your podge glue.
Carolyn, that's going to be beautiful. How about you?
Well, I'm just doing some painting, and I've done a bag for a little boy who's 3 years old, Mom's friend's son, and it has some applesauce in it because I just know that's something that he would love.
I know somebody else who would love some applesauce.
Well, then I guess I'll have to give some to you.
Oh, you're a good kid. Carolyn, what about you? Do you think you could give one of your pickles to somebody?
I'm giving it to my favorite aunt.
And that would be?
Aunt Janice.
Wrong answer, but I guess Aunt Janice would like it too. So what did you do with your first bags, Courtney?
Well, I just put some preserves in them and painted, and if I made a mistake, I just could go over it, and it's really great.
You guys have almost got enough done to put all the jars that you made today in them. You're way ahead of the game. Way ahead. This is going to be really fantastic. I can't believe how quiet you've been, too. I don't see this very often. Very seldom. So we're going to keep on with our crafts. We're going to have a lot of fun. And this is a good activity to keep the kids busy while you're doing your preserves.
Welcome back to Put a Lid on It.
On this segment, the kids are going to have control. They're going to show you how to make sweet pickled anything and sweet chunky applesauce.
Well, before they start to take control, I'm just going to give you the list of ingredients you need to make sweet pickled anything. You're going to start out with 2 cups of cider vinegar, 1 cup of sugar, half a cup of water, and half a teaspoon of pickling salt. Now for your spices, it's up to you. You need to use 2 teaspoons. You can either use pickling spice, whole allspice berries, cloves, dill seed, mustard seed, or cinnamon sticks. Now, if you have more than 1 child at home when you're making this, you might have a bit of a problem getting them to agree on what spice. So at our house, what we've had to do is we make our brine and then we divide it in 2, and one of the girls puts their spices in 1 pot and the other in another pot. So I'm going to let the girls start by mixing the brine. So what's that you're putting in?
The 2 cups of cider vinegar,
Okay.
sugar,
Carolyn, you can stir.
water, and pickling salt.
Now we had a little discussion before we started this, and we agreed the spices would be dill seed and whole cloves. What a combination.
Jane also has 3 rules that should apply for any child in the kitchen, and the girls might want to tell you about those.
There are 3 rules that you must follow when you're cooking alone. One of them is you always have to wash your hands.
And always have an adult around when you're chopping up food or using the stove. And the most important, always clean up your mess.
That's right.
We like that rule.
Now we're going to take this to the stove, and you want your brine to simmer for about 5 minutes. Now, while Jennifer's getting our brine that's been cooked, we're going to let the girls fill their jars.
So here we go, girls. These jars are hot, remember, so don't burn yourself.
Now, the reason this is called sweet pickled anything is because your children can put in anything they want. So what are you doing, girls?
I'm going to put in some cinnamon.
A little bit of everything.
That's a good idea.
And
Looks nice too.
some corn, some carrots, some beans, and some peppers.
Piece of zucchini.
You like zucchini, Courtney?
Yep, and carrots. Definitely lots of carrots.
Some peas
Cauliflower.
and some more corn and a lot of cauliflower. No.
Lots of broccoli. Raw broccoli.
Now, Courtney's pushing down her vegetables, and that's probably a good idea, because then you won't have a lot of things floating. Your jar looks pretty full, Court.
Now there's a little preparation to the vegetables. We've taken the vegetables and put them in a pot of boiling water. We've cooked them for about 2 minutes and just until they're a little bit tender. And then we run them under some cold water. Then we put them in our cups and they're all ready for the girls to put in their jars.
Looks great, girls.
So I'll get the brine, Jane, and you can fill up their jars.
All right.
We always do this part because it's hot.
Now, Courtney, can I have yours too?
And I'll hold it while you fill. Stand back, Carolyn, so we don't burn you.
Now,
Does that ever look good?
it does, and it will taste good too. And we have found that because the girls make it, they like to eat it. It makes a great treat for the lunch can too.
What a good mom you have letting you do this.
Yes, you could talk about what a great mom you have.
Or a great aunt.
But we won't.
We'll save it for another time.
Now, what are the next 2 steps before we finish that recipe, girls?
Wipe the rim.
And
We need need to put on our snap lids and then process it in a water bath canner for 10 minutes.
You're right.
And what do we do with our screw bands?
You have to screw them on fingertip tight before we put them in the canner.
Well, that looks really good. So I'm going to move a few things away and let you start with our chunky applesauce recipe, okay?
Before the girls start their chunky applesauce, I'm going to give you the ingredients. We need 5 pounds of tart apples, and we've used Granny Smith. We need 1/3 cup of water, and you can use any fruit you want. We've used dried apricots, and we also use 1/4 cup of those. And our last ingredient is liquid honey, and we use just enough to sweeten the sauce. So girls, take it away.
I'll put in some water.
Apples.
Apples, I'll help you so they don't fall out.
And to top it off, some
Dried apricots. Good choice.
Now Auntie will bring that to the stove.
Auntie will take it to the stove.
Carolyn?
Well, right here we have apple peeler. It's very handy if you're making applesauce and other things like that. All you do is turn it, keep turning it like this.
We make a lot of applesauce at our house, so we have found it comes in really handy. Now for our chunky applesauce, girls, do you remember how long we cook it?
20 minutes.
Close. Guess?
25 minutes.
A little less.
10 minutes.
You got it. And this is what it looks like after 10 minutes. What do you think, girls?
Good enough to eat.
Well,
I would say.
I think that's a good idea.
Here, now I'll add some of the honey.
Oh, you're going to add some honey? Good idea, Carolyn. Now, if I can talk the girls into letting us put some of this in our bottles, we're going to bottle it and process this recipe.
Taste test first, Mother.
Taste test first, yes. We'll do that in a minute.
This one's going to be processed for 20 minutes.
Well, thanks a lot, girls. You were a lot of help.
Now I want to see you get at that cleanup.
Oh, and good luck trying to put it in the jars. You might eat it first.
Chances are they will. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll be back in a minute. Now today's show was a little different because my daughters joined us. And today's prep tips are a little different too, because I'm just going to give you a few tips on how you can make successful preserves all the time. I'm going to start out with rule number 1, which is always check your recipe to make sure you have the proper ingredients. Now it's just too bad that my aunt in New Brunswick doesn't do this, because very often when my aunt is making any recipe, even if it's not preserves, it could just be a cake, she has to send my Uncle Graydon to the store repeatedly to get those missing ingredients. In fact, it's become such a joke in our family that I now, when I need something at the store, instead of telling my husband I need it, I call him Graydon. Say, Graydon, any chance you could go to the store for me? So if you don't have a Graydon in your house to go to the store, then it's always a good idea to check your list of ingredients first. Now your second tip would be, when you're going over your list of ingredients, you always want to use fresh ingredients, of course, but you also don't want to do any substitutions, because there's a very important balance, especially when you're making jams or jellies, between your acid, pectin, sugar, and fruit. And speaking of sugar, that's another tip. You don't want to cut down on the amount of sugar that is called for in your recipe, even though it might be tempting to do so. Because sugar isn't used just to sweeten, it's also a preserving agent in those jams and jellies. And speaking of preserving, you'll want to remember when you're using a pectin, the first important rule of thumb with pectins is check your expiration date on the box. You always want to make sure it's fresh pectin. And there are 3 types of pectin. You have liquid pectin, dry pectin crystals, and now light pectin. So when you're following a recipe that calls for, say, dry pectin, make sure you follow and use dry pectin for that recipe. Those recipes aren't interchangeable, so make sure you follow those areas also. Now my last tip would be, whenever you're making preserves, you saw with my daughters today, it can be lots of fun to include your kids or any member of your family. So just enjoy it. To make preserved peaches and strawberries for baby, you're going to wash your fruit, peel it, remove any pits or seeds, and measure so that you have 4 cups of fruit. Add 1 cup of water to this, bring it to a boil over medium-high heat, cover and boil gently until the fruit is very soft. Then pour your fruit into a blender or food processor and process until very smooth. Process in a water bath canner for 20 minutes for half-pint jars. For fresh peas and carrots, vegetables are best prepared by steaming or boiling in a minimum amount of water. You'll want to take fresh peas and carrots, 2 cups each, wash the vegetables, and cook them for about 2 minutes. Place the small pieces in a blender or food processor. Add just enough liquid to make it the right consistency for your baby. Place your peas and carrot mixture into ice cube trays while it is still hot and place in the freezer.
For sweet pickled anything, you need 5 cups of assorted vegetables. For our syrup, we need 2 cups of cider vinegar, 1 cup of granulated sugar, a half a cup of water, and a half a teaspoon of pickling spices. Wash your vegetables you want to use and cut them into pieces. Bring a large pot of water to boil on the top of the stove. Have a large strainer ready in the sink to pour the vegetables into when they're finished cooking. When the water starts to boil, put the vegetables into the boiling water and cook them for about 2 minutes. When the vegetables are finished cooking, pour them into the strainer to allow the hot water to run off and rinse the vegetables in cold water. Make the syrup by placing the vinegar, sugar, water, and salt in a large saucepan. Add your spices that you want and bring the syrup to a boil over high heat. Reduce the heat and simmer for 5 minutes. Pack the vegetables into clean jars, pour your brine over top, and you can process for 10 minutes. For chunky applesauce, you need 5 pounds of tart firm apples, 1/3 of a cup of water, 1/4 cup of dried cherries, blueberries, raisins, or chopped apricots, and you need enough granulated sugar or liquid honey to taste. Peel your apples and remove the core. Cut into large chunks and place in a large saucepan with your fruit. Add water and bring to a boil over high heat. Reduce the heat, cover and simmer until apples are tender. Now you can stir in your honey and make a slightly sweet sauce. Process for 20 minutes.
Thank you for joining us today on Put a Lid on It. We had a great time.
Showing you how to make kid food and baby food. On our next show, we're going to be making painless jellies.
Please make the recipes that we gave you today. And if you make a little extra, send them to us.
Hey, girls, that's not what we practiced earlier.
We said, make a little extra, you might want to
Give it to a neighbor.
That's right. Well, we have enjoyed having the girls with us today, but they have a little bit of cleanup to do in the kitchen.
So we'll see you next time on
Put a Lid on It.
Girls, send them to us.
Off to the dishpan with you, child.